Well, welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and got some great guests lined up for you today. And coming up in a few moments, we're going to have Charlie Kirk with us. He's the founder and executive director of Turning Point USA. And Charlie's going to be sharing with us some interesting poll that was done by the Harvard University that shows that only 32% now of millennials trust the president of the United States. Now, this is an interesting statistic because the president, both in his original election in 2008 and his re-election in 2012, he targeted millennials, and they voted for him very aggressively. Well, now about a third only trust him. Two-thirds have turned away from him. So we'll be talking to Charlie about that a little bit later on. And then coming up also, Colonel Dave Dotterrer will be with us, and we'll be talking about the mess of Cover, Oregon. In a few moments, we're going to connect with our good friend, Dr. Marshall Foster. And Dr. Foster heads up the World History Institute. And if you've never taken one of his tours, let me encourage you to prayerfully consider some of the tours that he does around the world. And one of the premier tours that he does is from Plymouth Rock down to Yorktown and everything in between, including the U.S. Capitol and down through Mount Vernon. Then you get down into Yorktown and some of the great historic places. And I think there's two things that Christians ought to do in their lifetime. They ought to take a tour of Israel, and you ought to do a U.S. Christian history tour of the United States, which is primarily there on the East Coast from Plymouth Rock down to Georgetown, and then you're able to go through the Capitol as well. Dr. Foster heads up the World History Institute, and of course you know he also has the movie Monumental, and I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at that, but you can go to his website and check it out, and you can go to his website there at the World History Institute and click on Monumental and watch that. In the meantime, he's put out a journal. It comes out every month, and this past month he did a journal called, an article called A Legacy of Freedom and Prosperity. Americans are longing to give their children a legacy of freedom and prosperity, as was certainly the case with our forefathers. And history clearly details that the only proven plan for such a legacy is rooted in Scripture, and Marshall Foster heads that up. So we're connecting with him now, and he's going to be sharing with that subject with us coming up in a few moments. And again, let me encourage you to go to his website and sign up for his newsletter. It is worth having come to you. It's called right here, The Journal. I have it in my hands right here. And also take a look at the movie Monumental. Well, I think we finally got his hat on to cover up his messy hair. Here's a guy that's going to be late to his funeral, but that's okay. At least he'll be there. Dr. Marshall. Hi, buddy.
It's great to be with you.
How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing so good.
You're looking good. I hope when I get 29, I can look like you.
Well, yeah, that's right. Times 3.
Hey, good to see you, pal. I was, as always, I love your newsletter journal. How can people get this, the Journal of the World History Institute?
Well, two ways. Of course, they can write to us or just go on the internet and go worldhistoryinstitute.com or .org, and they can do it that way. Or they can just sign up for our e-journal.
Okay.
So instead of getting a paper journal, or they can get an e-journal.
Okay.
Either one.
It's great. Well, this last one you did, Marshall, on a legacy of freedom and prosperity, in light of all the stuff that's going on in our culture, I think in the heart of Americans are saying, what are we leaving to our children? Walk us through this, because this is powerful.
Well, you know, this is, what are we going to leave to our children? And this has really struck me that the baby boomers, of which I am probably the oldest living member.
I'm right behind you.
Yeah. The baby boomers are probably the last generation that even has a memory of the legacy or the heritage that America had of enterprise, self-government, Christian character, Christian morality. Brought up with, we not so much brought up with it, but we had a memory of it from World War II and before. So people can kind of remember their grandparents. And I think that we have lost that because of the television, flat screen. Basically, people are learning a few things at a time, learning cosmic story of history, cause and effect. What got us as well as blessings as well as curses, and how do we get out of it? And so what I did in this journal is to really talk about what is it that we need to teach and how we need to teach it. That was our faith, all the way back to the Hebrew. Once we recapture that for our children, you don't need a small minority, then that minority carry it on to the next generation.
Okay. Hey, Marshall, let me do this. Let me take a quick break. We're not getting a good audio on you. The visual is great. We're having a little bit of a problem with an audio. Let me take a quick break and see if we can reconnect, because I can already tell I've touched your heart this morning. You're already teared up a little bit. So I want you to, I really want you to get into this, because, over the weekend, by the way, or this past week, the remaining World War II veterans were honored in Washington, D.C., and they call them the silent generation. They came home and didn't talk about it, but they wanted all of us to take the benefits of it, and I want you to get into that. So let me take a quick break. We'll reconnect with Marshall and see if we can get a little bit better audio quality. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Okay, we're back with our good friend Dr. Marshall Foster. He is the president of the World History Institute, and again, he puts out a journal, comes out monthly. You can get an e-copy of it or a hard copy of it. Just go to the worldhistoryinstitute.com or .org and sign up for it and support what he does. But this last writing, he wrote an article, just fabulous, A Legacy of Freedom and Prosperity. And Marshall, I think we got you figured out now. At least audibly.
You'll never figure out this thing.
No, we'll never figure out the rest. All right, walk us through this, because it's very passionate. I know it's deep in your heart, but I think we are beginning to wake up and say, hey, wait a minute, what are we leaving to our children?
Well, yeah, I mean, we have inherited this great love of liberty, and this great passion for freedom, this passion for self-government, Christian free enterprise, which bless the world as no other. We, in our day, do not know the uniqueness of it, but those throughout history have known it, because it had been passed on from generation to generation by parents to children. We no longer have those storytelling times at night for most people. People are locked in front of a screen, or the kids are off on their texting or whatever. The families are not so much together, and so Father is not teaching these great lessons. And what I'm communicating is that I want to leave behind for my children, my grandchildren, and for millions of others, prayerfully, the ability to teach these great truths so that we can bring liberty into the next generation. Perry, 20 years from now, you and I are going to be wearing wings somewhere, and hopefully we know where. And so that will be wonderful, but it won't be wonderful if we have to look back to our children and grandchildren and know that they don't know what to do.
Marshall, I don't think we ever felt the threat of losing the liberties as we have within the last couple of years. Something has now popped up, and we thought, uh-oh, what we took for granted really now is threatened.
Right. As I said in my letter, in our current crisis, we must reignite the passion and conviction that our inheritance of Christian free enterprise and family ownership of property is a sacred trust before God, and we will not give it up. We thought that was just something to take for granted, but it's not, because it shows to me that just since the turn of the century, I think, there's been a radical shift in people's view toward private property, where private property really means very little today. That's why people steal so much, and employees steal from employers, because they don't have a sense of the sacredness of private property. the fact that the Bible gives 10 commandments, the basic commandments as to how life should live. And of those 10 commandments, 6 of them protect the family and private property. Why? Because God knows that other than worshiping the true God, which is the most important thing, the second thing is that we must be careful to protect the basic unit of society, which is the family and which is the private property that they are called by God to own and to steward and to multiply so that all others might be blessed, not only themselves. That is the story that has been proven throughout history, but especially in American history. Throughout history, you could never develop free enterprise in places like China, as I point out in my newsletter. You know, one guy developed a wonderful steel plant in the 10th century in China, but as soon as the emperor found out that in that province everybody was getting wealthy because everybody was working for the steel company, it was a privately owned company developing swords, etc., the emperor came in, took it over, and destroyed the steel company, and they went back into the days of wooden swords. I mean, it destroyed their economy for 1,000 years. Because when you have a top-down control of free enterprise, of course, there is no free enterprise, and it's destroyed. That story and thousands like it have been told through the ages, but again, we don't know it. So we need to recapture that, don't we?
We do. Marshall, speak to the incredible spiritual side of this. Do we believers in America understand that our liberty comes from God, and that was in the heart of our forefathers? Somehow we think our liberty now comes from government. We're letting this thing fall through the cracks as believers. What can you say to that?
Well, this is a fundamental reality, and a very good question, by the way. The reason why we have done that is because we have separated out our spirituality and our Christianity from the story of liberty. Whereas the very scriptures that we look to for God's plan for our lives are the very story of the liberation of the world. And it was said so well by the Apostle Paul when he said that God was in Christ reconciling the world to himself, and we have been made ministers of reconciliation. Now be reconciled to God. The purpose of God was to liberate the world. Jesus said, I came to set the captives free. And so his liberation was going to take place through his church. As his church marches through history, what happens is everywhere they go, the liberty of the individual, of women, of children, of ignorant minds, of morality and character and families and free enterprise, all these things happen. Why do they happen? Only in Christianity. Because as Nietzsche, the founder of modern atheism, back at the beginning of the 20th century, said that, unfortunately, I'm here to report that the only basis for human rights is Christianity. So when we do away with Christianity, there will be no human rights. That's a paraphrase of the great Nietzsche. At least he was an honest atheist. He realized there will be no rights, because without the Bible, without the God of the Bible giving us, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, when we do not have the ethic of service and love and sacrifice for one another, and the idea of equal rights under the law, and men actually voting for their own representatives, all those concepts come from Christianity. And so Christianity is the great liberating force of human history. Mm-hmm. And we are not a subculture hiding in a little white church with a cross on it. And that's the mistake that Christians have made. Somehow they think that their Christianity is getting in a car on Sunday morning and driving into a church, when in reality they are the church. And they are, of course, in a body that they worship with, and it's wonderful. But that body and themselves are the salt of the earth, transforming everything they touch, intellectually, economically, spiritually, morally, in every area of life. And the history of the world is the history of the growth of liberty. Mm-hmm. How many people know that, Perry, that the world lived in tyranny for thousands of years until 1776? Actually, more people by far have been liberated as a result of America's liberation in our war than ever before in history. Before that, there were very few examples of truly free nations, other than the Hebrew Republic. You have to go back 3,500 years. And so after that, you see liberty growing and spreading through the missionary movement to Asia and to South America and to Africa and, of course, to Europe. And liberty began to spring among nations. Liberty is a new experience in the world, and it's the experience of the unleashing of the Bible. The Bible is the liberating force. Once it's believed and the God of the Bible comes into the hearts of individuals, then the principles of the Bible, which are the principles of liberty and freedom of the individual and self-government and not having to be controlled by a tyrant, someone to tell you what to do. That is the biblical way of living, and the church in the 21st century needs to recapture their vision for liberating the world.
Wow, beautifully said. Marshall, it appears that cynicism is the cancer of spirituality. I have never heard such cynical things, and even on what we would call conservative talk radio. It has become so cynical you can hardly stand it anymore. And therefore we are not doing unto others as we would want them to do unto us. We're adding to the polarization by being cynical. Where is the hope in cynicism? There is none.
Yes, yeah, they're exactly right. You know, I've been thinking about that. You know, the world is filled with now cursing, backbiting, and basically what the Bible would say, offering, going back to the Ten Commandments, you are destroying a man's reputation by speaking false witness about him. And what the television screens are filled with is gossip. And what the minds of our people are filled with is gossip, and basically, how can I talk someone else down? And so I think it's true of the right and the left today in American politics, is that it's a slam of character, especially true on the left, but it's also true on the right. And so, but the idea is not, that isn't the ultimate answer, is it? The ultimate answer is to give an answer, to give the true answer, and to give it in love, and to love your enemies as you love yourself while you're doing it. And that's difficult, but it's Christian.
It very much is. And therefore, you know, the old saying is we have to get people into the church to get them changed. We're expecting them to change in order to come into the church. We got to change our mind on that one.
Boy, do we. Yeah, yeah, the idea is not just you know, put up the best latte and the best, you know, come to us, but that we've got to go to them and love them and show our love for them, and then they'll want what we want. And I think that's going to be seen through our cultural involvement. And I think that the cultural collapse that we're seeing gives us ample opportunity to do good works. Remember, the Bible tells us through love and good deeds you show forth the glory of God. It's not through criticism and gossip. It's not through just talking people down. And so I think as our love and good deeds express themselves, that'll make a tremendous, tremendous difference. Remember, it's William Wilberforce in England that is remembered as the person who eliminated the slave trade over 30 years. And his friends, they were evangelicals, and they started up missions, not only for slavery, but to do away with alcoholism and you know, the poor, the prostitution in England, and all these problems and the starvation. And they did so with 200 different organizations, and they spread the love of Christ throughout England, brought a revival which lasted 100 years. The same is true in America through the Great Awakening that swept through in the love of Christ through the colony, so that people desired to be free and were willing to stand for liberty in the American Revolution. That was a Christian revolution that came from the heart. It comes from the Christian church. And I think part of that, Perry, is there's a discouragement among the church thinking, can we really turn things around? Right. Is this really the end time? It has to be because of a sign I've seen recently. And I think it may be the end times. We don't know. But we do know that we're called to occupy until he comes. And that occupation is a joyous job. My wife and I get up every morning, believe it or not, just loving life and loving our job. We love what we do in terms of our study and our research and getting this out to the kids of America. And I want every Christian in America to have the joy of getting up, and whatever they're doing to the glory of God, and they're doing it in a way that as they do it, people are attracted to our Savior by their intellect as well as their hearts, and they're giving them answers and loving them and being kind to them. That's not just easy believism. That's the character that transformed Rome.
You know, Marshall, we get a lot of calls from response from people like you being on the air and others, and throughout the week and every month, and thousands really. And it boils down to two things. What is truth, and who can I trust? There seems to be a revival, but unlike a revival we would expect, that people are beginning to ask the hardcore questions. What is truth, and who can I trust? Therefore, it's the church's golden hour. I mean, that we have the answers to both those.
Yes. Yes, we do. And what is truth? We know the truth, and the truth will set them free. It's Jesus Christ, and it's His Word. And we have the intellectual as well as the spiritual understanding that that's true. So we can answer those questions. Christianity does not run from the scientific questions or the intellectual questions or the questions of history. I love to debate professors on which view of religion builds the best society. And it's obvious, if you want to know what truth is, what brings liberty, freedom, justice, prosperity, and lots of Starbucks, it's only Christianity. Christianity is the only one that's going to give you what you want in terms of your society and your freedom and your SUV. I mean, just looking at it from a physical point of view, from a spiritual point of view, then it's quite obvious: eternal life, life eternal, and the joy of waking up without guilt on your heart. God has given us all the tools we need, Perry, to restore and rebuild our land, not by force, but by the grace of our God, and by our getting up in the morning and trusting Him, learning from Him, and believing for a revival and a restoration. And I'm challenging people throughout the country. I'm the head of a Prayer 31 campaign this year. We have over 1 million people are going to be praying for a month before the election, with a booklet that we're sending out to them. And they can contact us about that too at the World History Institute. If they want to be a part of that prayer campaign, a month before the election, praying 30 days every day in your church and having a plan to do so. We're having over 1 million will be involved in it, and over 10,000 churches. So pray for that too. But we need to pray and believe that God would awaken our churches to this great cause, Perry, that you are promoting, which is the cause of Christ. And I encourage your audience. There are many that are listening that they've lost trust. Some people have betrayed them. Maybe their mate betrayed them, or a Christian friend who they were trusting betrayed them. We're here to say that God is trustworthy, and there are good Christian people out there who love you and are concerned about you too, and we want to help. And so we need to show forth the love of God outside the church doors and into the homes of people. And if we do, I believe that great revival you're talking about will sweep right into the mainstream of American society again.
Thank you, brother. Love you. Go to worldhistoryinstitute.com or .org. Get his journal. And what is the prayer thing? I want to be a part of that. I want to promote that. So I'll have you back on and we'll do it.
Yeah, Prayer 31. I'll be sending you all the information here coming out in June.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, bro.
Appreciate you.
Love you, man. See ya.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Hi, Dr. Marshall Foster. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at theDove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Well, earlier, our Steve Johnson had a chance to talk to Pat Williams. Now, you may know him, one of the originators of the Orlando Magic team, and he writes pretty interesting. He's had some interviews and a tremendous Christian. So let's join Steve and Pat as they chat together today.
Appreciate you carving out some time to talk to us, because looking at your schedule, you're a very busy person, if not even just writing books, because this is the second book that you've really written about Coach John Wooden, isn't it?
Well, Steve, actually, it's the third. I wrote a book some years ago called How to Be Like Coach, and that got me into the topic of John Wooden. And then a couple of years ago, I wrote a book called Coach Wooden, the 7 principles that shaped his life and will change yours. And this is the third one, called Coach Wooden's Greatest Secret. And we had a wonderful time putting this book together. It has just been released, and I think it just gives us another look at the mind and the life of this remarkable athletic leader, but more importantly than that, a remarkable American who has so much to share with us, even though he passed away a few years ago.
Well, you know, I came from Arizona, so we always had this Pac-10 competition with Arizona State and University of Arizona against any of the California teams. So we saw Coach Wooden for years take what was, you know, every 4 or 5 years, you have the complete team turn over, and yet he was consistent in being able to bring the players to do what they did the best, really. So I want to talk about The Greatest Secret, which almost sounds like Da Vinci Code Part 3 or something like that. But I want to ask you about the aspects, since it's subtitled The Power of a Lot of Little Things Done Well. That seems to be the key, does it not, to the secret that you found with Coach Wooden? Why don't you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, we were having dinner one night at his favorite restaurant, the Valley Inn, near his home in Encino, California. At this point, Coach Wooden probably was in his early 90s, but still sharp as a tack. And I remember sitting next to him as he was eating his clam chowder. And, excuse me, and I said to him, "Coach, you've been on this earth a long time." I said, "Is there one secret of success, perhaps, that you could point out?" And in that deliberate, understated way, he said to me, "Well," he said, "the closest I could come to one secret of success would be a lot of little things done well." And as I reflected on that, Steve, I thought, boy, as they say in the Southern Baptist world, that'll preach. In my case, I thought, boy, that'll write. That could be a book someday. So it's quite a thrill, frankly, to have that book out and, you know, in bookstores as we speak.
Yeah.
And, you know, and really looking at that one aspect of Coach Wooden's feelings. And then when you really get into the topic, Steve, and really examine how he coached and how he taught and how he went about his life and how he did things, boy, he was on top of every detail.
Well,
left nothing to chance.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about that. So once he gave you that idea, did you start thinking yourself, what, I wonder, are those little things that he's talking about, or did he elaborate further on that?
Well, I thought immediately, and he always would tell you that story about the shoes and the socks, which he became famous for. On the first hour of practice every fall, he would instruct his players on how to put their socks on properly, and how to lace up their sneakers, and how to get the tongue adjusted, and how to tie the shoes properly, and how to smooth the socks out so that there would be no little wrinkles. And I did ask him about that once, and he said all I needed was one little wrinkle in one sock on one foot, creating a little blister, which by the end of practice on the first day could have been a big blister. And suddenly I got a key player sitting down for a month, you know, because he didn't get the socks and the shoe thing right. Anyway, Coach Wooden taught that every day, and the players would practice putting their socks on and putting their shoes on properly. And he did say, he said, as far as I can tell, he said, we never had a problem with blisters. So that's the classic story. But he was a absolute stickler for fundamentals. He never viewed himself as a coach, always a teacher. He always referred to himself as a teacher. And what do teachers do, Steve? Well, I'll tell you what they do. I think they're on top of the little things, They're not letting anything slip or slide every day. They're staying and reinforcing that things get done the right way and building a foundation. That's what good teachers do. And Coach Wooden, even though he was teaching basketball, he always viewed himself that was his classroom and that he was there teaching the fundamentals of life, the fundamentals of the game. I mean, just absolutely a stickler for details.
Well, and that reminds me, when people have talked about the impact of him, previous players or coaches that have been with him, they talk not about what necessarily a great coach he was, but what he meant from a lifestyle example, really. And I can imagine, I mean, it sounds like when you're a stickler for small things like that, that almost sounds like you're an over-the-board taskmaster. But that really wasn't his style, was it? When he's talking about those little things, he's not talking about the unimportant things, but little important things, right?
Oh, I think so. He was certainly not a Simon Legree. But I'll tell you this, he had the respect of his players and a certain amount of fear. He could be very tough. He could be very demanding, and required these players to toe the line and stay within his foundation. He wouldn't let anything slide with him, and I don't think they really appreciated him until much later, Steve. Much later, after they became parents and they became grandparents, then they gravitated back to John Wooden, and fortunately for them, he lived within a few months of 100. So they were able to go to his condo and spend time with him when he was in his late 70s, in his 80s, in his 90s. That doesn't happen in every case with players and coaches, but they were very fortunate to have that late in life relationship. And then they began to really appreciate what he was doing with them. And they came to the conclusion, now we get it. This was far beyond basketball, even though he was a great teacher of basketball and we had tremendous teams, but he was really teaching us how to be successful in life.
Yeah. I want our audience to know we're talking to Pat Williams, who's the author of the book Coach Wooden's Greatest Secret, The Power of a Lot of Little Things Done Well. Now, although, Coach Wooden is on the cover of it holding a basketball, this isn't necessarily just for people who like sports, is it? I mean, you're talking about making little things that we may think are little things, like thankfulness being a habit and so on. Talk a little bit about what you've done with this book in that lifestyle mode that you were discussing that John Wooden had kind of left as a legacy.
Well, Steve, you're correct. This is far beyond a basketball book because John Wooden is far beyond just a basketball instructor or a basketball coach. He's a life coach. So we get into a lot of different things here, about dealing with fundamentals and keeping things simple and controlling those things over which you have control. We get into some discussion about leadership and how that fits into this whole area. So yes, this is a life book, far beyond basketball. You're not going to come away with a lot of X's and O's in this book. Although I must tell you this, John Wooden's practices, they tell me, were absolutely unbelievable. So organized, so detailed, down to the last second. They were not all that long, but there was not one wasted second in those drills in practice. And Coach Wooden had those practices laid out on 3x5 cards, to the last detail. And that's how he ran them. And then he saved the cards. So if we said to him, Coach, what did you do in practice on December 15th, 1953? I mean, he'd go right to that filing cabinet and pull that card out.
Wow.
And he'd be able to show you exactly, down to the last little detail, what they did in practice that day. That's how he did his coaching. That's how he did his teaching. Quite remarkable. He was an amazing man.
From what you're saying here, I can see how people can take this book and perhaps look at it their own lives, saying, okay, what little things do I need to work on to make a larger impression. I'm also thinking of people who might be in management in some way, and they're looking at this saying, my style hasn't been as effective as I want it to be, even though I have the best intentions. What would you say to those people about what they need to be looking at to kind of get started looking at the detail without becoming obsessed with that and keeping the big picture?
Well, Steve, I think as you ask that question, the first thing that hits my mind is leadership. And you could call this book a leadership book. So I would encourage leaders, first of all, as in the case of John Wooden, the importance of having a clear vision of where you're headed and what you're trying to accomplish and what the goal is, what the mission is. And then you've got to be able to communicate that vision effectively. John Wooden was a wonderful communicator. You know, he didn't waste words. He knew exactly what had to be said, when it had to be said, and he said it with directness and force if necessary, but he was not wasting any words. And people skills are awfully important. John Wooden was not a gusher. You know, he was not going to go out of his way to give false praise. But if a player deserved it, he was certainly there to reinforce and let that player know that he had done a good job. People skills are so important in that area. And I would encourage management leaders, you know, to reach out to people, have a good word for them, encourage them, make sure they know that they're appreciated. Remember Henry Ford years ago said, why is it when all I want are a man's hands and I get his whole body? Well, that's what happens. We get people's whole bodies and we have to be interested in them.
And it sounds like that John Wooden's legacy, really, you've been able to incorporate within your own leadership as well.
I've learned so much from him, and I'm so grateful that I got to spend time with him, you know, in his last decade. One of the few people, Steve, I've ever been around that when you left him, left his presence, you wanted to be a better person. You wanted to please him. Even though I lived 3,000 miles away, I wanted him to be proud of me. He was in his 90s. I guess I was in my 60s. And, you know, I wanted him to be proud of me and feel good about me as a human being. But as I said, when you left him, boy, it took about 3 or 4 days to come down from the high that you felt when you were with him. I don't know, maybe there are a handful of people who have made me feel that way, but not many. He's one of the very few who just had that ability through his wisdom and through his life and through his manner that it just gave you an enormous lift.
Well, that's great. Pat Williams, Vice President of the NBA's Orlando Magic, author of the book Coach Wooden's Greatest Secret. Thanks for being with us. Appreciate it very much.
Steve, thanks for the invitation, and I hope people enjoy the book. It's in bookstores now and up on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com as well. Thanks for inviting me. Good to be with you.
Thank you.
All right, get the book. I think you'll find it to be a fascinating read. Well, what happened? What is happening? What will we do? What's going on with Cover Oregon? Colonel Dave Dotterrer is in the house. We'll talk to him about it next.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Great to have Colonel Dave Dotterrer back with us in the studio today. Today he's here as a candidate because he's running for the state senate, and he's also previously served as a very interesting guy. You were kind of like the budget liaison between the Republican caucus on the House and the Senate.
That's correct.
You kind of kept all that going.
I worked all through that, and it was fascinating because you got to sit in both caucus meetings and see how the caucuses are different, because they really are different.
They really are different.
Yeah.
Well, now you're on the campaign mode, and you are running in this primary coming up on May 20th. The district is District
3.
District 3.
Basically the southern half of Jackson County, including all of Medford.
And if you win the primary, you'll be up against incumbent Senator Alan Bates.
That's correct.
All right. And we have invited Alan Bates and you to a on-air forum. I won't call it a debate. I just want to sit down and talk with you guys, and I think we look forward to do that in the fall.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, looking forward
Cover
to that too.
Oregon. What a mess.
Yeah.
An absolute complete embarrassment. It's a mess, and everybody's running from this thing. I mean, it's the perfect storm for Republicans. Why aren't we capitalizing on this thing?
Well, we are, and if you listen to the campaign around the state, they absolutely are. But there's two words that come to mind when you think about this debacle known as Cover Oregon. That's malfeasance and hubris. Those are the two words that come to mind. Malfeasance for wasting $250 million.
Billion.
A quarter of $1 billion has been wasted. They also made a promise to the people of Oregon that said, we'll take over this part of the health insurance industry and we'll provide you with this portal and we'll provide you with an alternative. They failed to provide that, so now we have people who are hung out there. We actually, if you talk to insurance agents, they'll tell you that if they do this switch from the state to the federal system, they're not sure that if you signed up with the state that it'll automatically transfer over to the Fed. You may have to sign up again. Okay. And then finally, the legislative leadership, including my opponent, just failing miserably to their constitutionally mandated responsibility of oversight and auditing of this, because this was a very, very important, big, and it was a complex program. Everybody knew this up front. This was very complex, and we also know that Oregon's track record with these kinds of projects is absolutely miserable. So,
all right, $250 million down the drain. We know that Congressman Walden and Representative Dennis Richardson, who's running for governor, have called for an investigation.
Correct.
To take a look at this. But nothing's happened. I mean, in the real world, you'd call for a refund. Why aren't we calling for a refund?
But
somebody's got to get sued over this. I mean, this is crazy.
That really is. But who's going to get refunded? This is the.
Well, you and I are the taxpayers.
Well, that's right. The federal taxpayers.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's our taxes.
That's our taxes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We'd ask for a refund, but who are you going to get refunded from? I mean, you can't refund you take the money out of the governor's pocket or my opponent's pocket. I mean, the money, if you've already spent that money and you've paid private contractors, you've paid them for all those ads, are you going to take the money back from them? And if the feds come back and ask for a refund, the money has to come out of the Oregon State budget. So you know that the Oregon State leadership is not going to ask for that because that's $250 million.
But why can't the state go after the company that failed?
Well, they could, but actually, the malfeasance is on the part of our state officials. I mean, remember, they signed a time and materials contract with Oracle, okay? And because they signed a time and materials contract, you essentially hired them as temps.
Yeah.
You said, look, you bring in these people and help us write the code, but we're the management, we're the leadership at the top of all this. So, yes, I'm sure that there will be some kind of there will be something action taken against Oracle.
Okay.
No doubt about that.
Now, it's been said the governor can fix this through executive order or something. Then you find out the governor can't do this. It has to go to a special session?
Well, here's what took place. People, including my opponent, were rendering these legal opinions saying that, well, you know what, the governor has the authority to do this. Well, last week, the Oregon Legislative Council, these are the lawyers and the legal counsel to the Oregon legislature, came back and said, oh no, you can't. These are the people that actually wrote the bill, drafted the bill. They came back and said, no, if you look in that bill, it was written in such a way, you didn't give yourself an escape clause.
Wow.
So you have to come back in and change the statute so that you can do this. Now, that's just an opinion, so we'll see how this all battles out.
Right.
But it just tells you what a mess it is, because do we have to or don't we? And if you do it, if the governor just goes ahead and does it, what happens if there's a court case and they say, oh no, you didn't have the authority to do that? So this is what this whole mess is all about. And going back to that second word I was talking about, which is the hubris. The hubris of a state government that believes it can take over something as complex as the health insurance industry and for an entire state and tell people we're going to force you in through this single portal and that somehow you can do this, you know, that your state government has that capability to do that, and it clearly doesn't. I mean, it clearly failed to do that. So, okay, now what? You know, the answer is you're going to have to go into the federal system, because the federal law says you have to have some kind of an exchange, either the federal one or the state. Well, we failed in that piece, so now we're going to have to transition. Well, okay, so what's the plan for that transition now that this has collapsed? Yeah. Okay, the word I'm getting is that right now there isn't a plan. Now you throw in this legal opinion that puts it all in a turmoil and says, well, wait a minute, do you have to change the statute or not? Can the governor do this unilaterally, or do you have to bring in the legislature and change the law? Okay, how do you change the law? I mean, this is really. All right,
so the governor's up for re-election. Is this an issue with him? I mean, are you sensing people are saying, wait a minute,
yes,
John, you've really messed up here?
Yes, that's right. It is very much an issue. I've already walked 2,500 doors, and I can tell you out on the campaign trail, people are bringing up Cover Oregon. They're just saying they understand that this debacle is indicative of the leadership we have in this state, both at the governor level and also with the legislature.
You know, the irony of all ironies, Dave, is it would have been better just to stick with the Oregon Health Plan.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, see,
as crazy as that was, it's a whole lot better than what we got.
Well, what's actually happening is, you know, the Oregon Health Plan. The plan was to sign up about 200,000 people based on this. They've already signed up about 300,000 people, about 50% more, and it's literally. I don't know if you saw the opinion piece in the Mail Tribune Saturday, but it was from Bend, and I talked to a Bend doctor. What's happening is so many more people are being signed up for the Oregon Health Plan. They're overloading the system, and they've signed up so many more people. For example, in the Bend Bulletin did an investigative report on this. They've signed up 50% more, or more than 50% more people than they expected, and the problem is that every doctor in the Central Oregon area has now come back and said, I'm not taking any more Medicaid patients. Well, okay, so wait a minute. If you set up a system in which you put people onto Medicaid or the Oregon Health Plan, and none of the doctors are going to take any additional patients, where do you leave the patients? Mm-hmm. I mean, and I can tell you that on the door, I had a woman who was pleased on one side that she said that, you know, I was signed up for the Oregon Health Plan. She said that's the good side of it, but the problem is I have an arthritic condition. I went to my doctor, and he said I only take one Medicaid patient a month, and you're now on a 2-year waiting list to do this. I mean, you know, now fortunately her condition is not life-threatening, but still it's a two-year waiting list.
What a mess.
Yeah.
And I've seen now we're 800,000, and this is just the beginning, 800,000 physicians nationwide are beginning to stand up and rebel against Obamacare. So, something's got to stop. Yeah. We can't force this thing through. It's not working. And so I don't know what the solution. All right. What do you think of the state economy? I got a minute left. I got so many questions.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'll come back on sometime. But no, the state economy.
Yeah.
You know, we need to remember that the state economy is performing poorly, and that the Jackson County economy our unemployment rate, for example, is 25% higher than the rest of the state.
We still got a problem.
We still got a problem.
All right, Dave, we got a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
And you're up for election May 20th. The ballots came out over the weekend. People want to get a hold of you and talk to you. What do they do?
DaveDotterrer.com.
DaveDotterrer.com. All right, thanks, Dave.
Gotcha.
All right, we'll see you next time on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Jim, and I work at theDove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us.